This is a Geek Leader. Hey, Geek Leaders. Welcome to episode 129 of a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and I want to start out by reading a rating and review. Remember, I told you guys to head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and review, and I'll read some of those on the show, so I'm keeping up with that. This one is from Karen, and she says, awesome show. This is an awesome show. John interviews amazing leaders who are sure to inspire you and achieve your goal. I highly recommend subscribing to a Geek Leader so that you don't miss an episode. You won't regret it. You're making a great impact. Keep up the great work, John. Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate the review, and it's always encouraging for me to see these reviews, and it keeps making me want to put out more episodes and do more, and I really appreciate it. And it also is helpful for getting more great guests onto the show. So if you haven't left a review, please head on over and do that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button, and that way you won't miss an episode and you'll get the next one. Anyway, let's get to today's guest. Today on the show, we've got Angelic Gibson. She's the Chief Information Officer at AvidXchange, and AvidXchange is a company right in my backyard here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they've been going through some tremendous growth. So we talk about what it's like to manage growth. We talk about the difference between the roles of a CTO and CIO, and overall, it's just a fantastic conversation. So give it up for Angelic Gibson.
Thank you, John. It's great to be with you today.
If you could, just to give my listeners a little bit of context and of your background, could you tell us how you got involved in tech, where it all started from you, and how your journey has progressed to get to being the Chief Information Officer?
Absolutely. So many years ago, not to tell you how many years ago, but many years ago, I started off in technology as a software engineer, and I went through the traditional route of graduating from a university with my bachelor's in information technology, focused on software engineering, and at a very early age in my career, within literally the first 2 to 3 years I was, going into my career, I moved into leadership, and I give credit to that to my ability to communicate. So if you know a lot of software engineers, sometimes we can be introverts by nature. I am not. I'm the exact opposite, and I love to communicate. So I think that was my forte into leadership, and I've been in leadership ever since. Hands-on engineering and management for quite a few years, and then really transitioning into full-time leadership about 12 to 15 years ago.
So what was that transition like for you? You mentioned that the communication part was easy. Did you find it difficult that you're no longer writing code? And kind of, when you had that full-time hands-off experience, was that hard for you? Was it easy? What was that transition like?
The transition was definitely difficult when you go from being the subject matter expert in your discipline to having to pass that baton and really lean in on your colleagues that you're now leading. And I think it's critical as a leader, as you're going through that transition, not to lose touch with technology. I think part of what makes a really solid technology leader is being present and sticking with what are the current trends, happening in the technology space, just to keep the respect of the teams that you're leading, and so you can make wise decisions along the way. But that balance of moving away from being the subject matter expert to then leaning in to my teammates' experience, and then also earning their trust as I was no longer the SME, that was definitely the tight transition point.
So how do you go about staying current? What are some of the methods you use to, understand what's going on, what the changes are, and all the different areas that fall under your control, I guess you would say?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I surround myself with many, many bright individuals, people who are smarter than myself. And I believe in the art of asking questions. Ask questions until you're on the verge of probably driving someone crazy. But the more questions you ask, the more open-ended they are, the more that you can learn and glean from other people's experiences, as well as, attending conferences. The partners that I have in place with any organization that I work at, I go deep with my partners, understanding what is their technology, working with their product teams. As an example, at AvidXchange, we have a pretty deep partnership with Microsoft. So it's, taking the time to go out to Seattle, spending time with their product teams to understand where they're currently at, what is the roadmap looking like, what are the trends happening that we need to be aware of, and how do we stay on top of it. So a mix between, industry conferences, deep partnerships with vendors, and certainly leaning on my teammates for their expertise keeps me up to speed.
Yeah, no, that's good. I know that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of managers kind of struggle with is they get out of development or get out of engineering in some form or fashion because they're management and they step back and they rely on their team, and then they kind of lose touch. When something new comes up, they're like, well, "Why do we need that? What's so special about virtualization or cloud computing?" And it's kind of interesting to see how some people are kind of falling behind and how other people are able to stay current. I think conferences is a great method, and I try to utilize attending conferences and speaking at conferences whenever I can.
Yeah, it's a great avenue. Just lean on other people's knowledge. And, I think that's the fastest form of learning is by learning through other people, as well as I do a lot of shadowing too. If we have I remember when DevOps started to become a thing, I would sit down with my DevOps engineers and just say, show me, what are you doing? Teach me. And not that I would be hands on a keyboard doing what they're doing, but I would be, leaning into them and looking over their shoulder just to shadow them and learn from them. So I think it's the best way to, if there's a new technology coming into the marketplace and we need to understand it, tapping into the architects, they're doing proof of concepts, they're testing things out. What does that actually look like? What's the results of it? Just so you can connect the dots all the way through.
So do you ever have any pushback, like the boss wants to look over my shoulder and see what I'm doing all day long?
No, they get excited. I think with anybody, you want to showcase your experience and your knowledge. And when someone is doing it not to challenge your skill, but to actually embrace it and empower it, it's a win-win for the individual who's teaching me, and it's a win for me because I'm learning. So I think it's a win-win all the way around.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think whenever I've done that with my team, kind of sat with the help desk group for a day or two and just kind of watch what they're doing. I like to call them field trips. So take little field trips with the team. And it's always been exciting because you always learn something new or you figure out something more that the people are doing than you thought they were. And it's always enlightening for me.
That's right. Yep.
So what is the difference between being a CIO versus a CTO? Because I think your company has both. Is there like a crossover? Is it a relationship where you work really close together, or are you guys responsible for two different things and don't really talk a whole lot? How does that work out?
That's a great question. So Chris Tinsley, our CTO at AvidXchange, he's actually one of the co-founders at AvidXchange, and we have a really deep working relationship together. We partner very well. He is more on the front lines of who is looking to integrate into our platform and what are the technology things that we need to be aware of on the forefront to take our platform that we have and make sure that we're making it extensible, and not from the sense of setting the architectural blueprint of what we're building. It's more along the lines of, if you heard that we just launched a partnership with Concur as an example, is what does that partner integration need to look like, and how can our platform be flexible to easily bring on new partners? So he's on the forefront working with our growth team, our marketing team, product marketing team to understand what is the continuing demand in the marketplace, what's new opportunity, and how is that going to influence the overarching technology direction of the platform. So I would say he is a customer of mine. So he is serving me information, and then my team, we're digesting that. We're actually creating the architecture for the technology that we're creating and putting into the marketplace. We build it out, and then obviously we run it from an operations perspective.
Awesome. So more or less, he's kind of feet on the ground, meeting with the groups, figuring out what the next thing is ahead of time to communicate that back to you guys, so you guys can kind of lay that roadmap.
Exactly. And let's say that we could be looking to build a new relationship with an ERP provider. It could be when we seek to understand how that ERP would connect into our platform. what are the requirements going to be? And he knows the platform inside and out because he's been here since the beginning. So he can very quickly assess whether it's a small effort to actually onboard that ERP or is it going to be a larger effort. So he's kind of a shield to the organization as well, helping make sure that we stay in balance with what we can deliver and, balanced with the commitments that we're making.
Awesome. So being the fact that I'm close to Charlotte too, and I see AvidXchange in the news quite a bit around here as far as your growth, and you guys have been growing a lot significantly. I mean, over the last several years, I guess you'd say, but I heard something like doubling in size, and what does that growth do to a technology leader? Like, because I'm imagining your technology is also growing, your operations is growing, your infrastructure is growing, and your people, your staff is obviously growing. How do you handle all that change?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work. I've been with AvidXchange for 1 year now, and in the past year, we've kind of zoomed out a little bit, and we've identified when we have growth and we quantify that growth, what is the impact to people, process, and technology? And so we have come up with I would say, a baseline approach to understanding if we onboard X volume onto our platform, what does that mean from an operational perspective? Does that actually impact the number of customer care cases it's going to have into the organization? And what does that, the escalation pipeline look like? So I will call that process. So we understand as we add on volume, what is it going to do to our overall people and process costs? And then we are continually doing performance aggression testing just to say what will future impact potential scalability constraints be created versus, for the growth that we're creating. And we have a roadmap to stay ahead of that. So it's more of understanding the technology. Where is the technology at right now, our platform? Where's the scaling friction points going to be? How do we solve those before we hit the scale? And then how do we think about the impact to our people and our process along that growth continuum?
Now, you mentioned earlier in the conversation DevOps. How has DevOps played a role in your growth?
Yeah, DevOps is going to be critical to our future. I would say that we've started the journey, to move into more of a CI/CD pipeline DevOps approach probably 24 months ago. It started before I arrived, and we are still in the early stages of that. There are some larger parts of our platform that are moving into that way of working, but it's still new for us. AvidXchange, although we are a fast-growing company today and have been for the past 7 years, we've been around for 20 years. So there are areas of our platform that we are continually looking to modernize, and as we modernize it, we are moving those new work streams into a DevOps pipeline.
Yeah, I know I've interviewed several people about digital transformation, and we've actually gone through a digital transformation in my current company, and DevOps always seems to come up as being one of the key factors in there and the key roles that need to be played. Was that a mind shift change that you were aware of that kind of happened when that was pulled in there, or was it something that everybody was just excited about and jumped on board?
Well, we're still in the early stages of it. So I would say that there are pockets of teammates that are really energized by it and are actually fully embracing it. Others are excited about it, but not fully engaged yet. So we're actually in the early stages of kicking off an effort to be very intentional to take our entire platform in a very, agile, iterative way into new DevOps pipelines. So I would anticipate over the next 18 to 24 months that our entire team at AvidXchange and Technology will be onboarded into that new way of working. And people are very excited about it. But it's a need. It's, this is, as far as digital transformation is concerned, my philosophy is if you look at what is disrupting the marketplace right now, digital has disrupted brick and mortar. But more importantly, as we move forward into the future, digital will disrupt digital. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if we cannot produce value in the marketplace on our platform faster than other folks, then we're going to be disrupted by somebody else. So whatever the constraints are in the continuum of ideating all the way to building to delivery, whatever the constraints are in that continuum of delivery, It's up to us to remove them as fast as possible. So whether it be through DevOps or other practices, it's understanding where your friction points are and removing them so you can speed up the delivery of the value you're trying to create.
Have you seen any growing pains or any tough times that come about through this that you just have to kind of learn to move around or move through?
Yeah, well, change is hard in general, right? They consider change to be one of the top three stressors that a human can actually go through. So whether you're changing the skill of an individual, you're going to have them upskilling, learning new languages, new ways of working. That puts stress on a team, as well as this is a lot of transformational process change. You're shifting things that used to be on the right, testing and operations and disconnected silos, and you're moving all the way to the left with engineering, and you're automating. So you're really transforming the end-to-end operation, and that's certainly stressful. So change management is extremely critical, and a really healthy, positive outlook. I work with my people leaders too, and I call this, in air quotes, a joy factor. What's the temperature of the team? What's their joy factor? Because if we don't have joy and we don't have a healthy outlook, then it can be very challenging. I just closed out a 2-day summit with my entire team. There was about 300 of us that came together for 2 days. And one of the biggest things I pressed on in the midst of this transformational change that we're going on is the mindset. If we don't renew our minds and we don't captivate negative thoughts and we don't transform them into positive ones and really keep our head in the game in a positive way, that could be the one thing that's going to pull the entire team back. So I think mind over matter is one of the most critical things to any transformational change. Technology is easy, process is process, but it's the human mind that can be the most challenging aspect of any transformation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it was Henry Ford that said, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what was this summit like? I'm really curious. What is a 2-day summit with tech leaders and people leaders? What's that like?
It was a really great experience. It's the first one we've done at AvidXchange. So this was our inaugural launch. And we started off with, we've actually just gone into partnership. I can't share that name, but we will be doing a press release here soon. But we've just gone into partnership with a strategic thought leader that's very well known to actually help us with our transformational change from a cultural shift perspective, from a mindset shift perspective, really being platform-minded thinking for the modern day engineering experience. We announced to our team who we will be co-creating with and who we're going to be on this, multi-quarter journey. So that was super exciting. We did a huge unveiling, and the team really felt connected and included in where we're beginning and where we're headed. So that was highly inspirational. And then we just took time for each team and area by product and by functional area and technology to highlight their top 3 successes of this year. And we just used it as a time of celebration and really praising our teammates and just pouring into them. Day 2 was all about investing in our Avid teammates. So I believe in strength-based leadership, if you're familiar with Cliff Finders. So
Absolutely.
So we just did a launch of that. And I've been working with my leadership team. It's about 35 folks over the past quarter, introducing it, understanding what our leadership strengths are, et cetera. And now we've taken it all the way down to individual teammate. And so we got to partner with our talent development team, and they took us through a whole day of workshops, just introducing us to strengths as an individual, as a team, corporately as a larger team, and then how do we plan to roll that out and continue to truly lead through strength going into 2020. So I would sum it up with, it was all about the teammate. How do we celebrate them? How do we invest in them? And then how do we help them build connections across the team?
Awesome. Yeah, I actually had Tom Rath, the author of Strength Finders, on not too long ago. I guess it's been almost a year ago now, where we talked about strength-based leadership, and it was an awesome interview. So Did you do that remotely? Did you do it at your headquarters, or what was the logistics like?
Yes. So we flew everyone in to Charlotte. So we have locations in Houston, Salt Lake City, Pembroke, Massachusetts, and Somerset, New Jersey, as well as just recently we had an acquisition with BankTel. So that has now taken us to Johnson City and Alabama. So we brought all of our locations in, and we have a very large open space on our campus. It's it's called the Silver Hammer. Don't know if that's relevant, but it's a very large open space where we basically can transition it into a conference-like feel, and that's where we hosted everyone.
Man, that sounds like so much fun. I've never been a part of like a really large multi-day technology summit for my company, but it sounds like a lot of fun.
It was tremendous, phenomenal feedback. If you stretched far and wide getting feedback, I like to ask lots of questions throughout the day. And the sentiment and the heart of it was just inspirational and very exciting, to think about how we're headed into 2020 and crystallizing our vision for that. So it was very fruitful.
Is this something you think you'll do every year or every other year, or what do you think the future of this will be?
I would love to do it every year, if not twice a year, especially while we're going through this transformational change. It's so critical to ensure that our teammates are engaging, they feel connected, and that we invest in them. I mean, we're facing a 0% unemployment. It's negative in technology, as you're well aware. So, we're constantly looking at one of our number one goals in our 5 winning moves at AvidXchange is to be a great place to work. So to be the best, to be, a beacon in the community that we serve, Charlotte being one of them, we want to be one of the best places to work. And that's a journey. You don't just get there overnight. So part of it is how do we attract and retain our talent? And part of the retain side of the house, in my deep belief, is just really pouring and investing in the teammate. And so these summits is a way to do that, and then to also make them feel connected to the broader technology team.
Yeah, I imagine. I know for me, just hiring in general has always been difficult, and especially when you're looking for software developers. But being in the financial space in Charlotte, you've got banks, you've got Credit Karma, you've got LendingTree, you've got all kinds of competition. I imagine so that's probably pretty difficult to go about that. What are some of the things that AvidXchange offers that will help retain those people or get those developers excited about coming to work at Avid?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's the company. The company, I call AvidXchange the Apple of fintech. So who Apple was to our field, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we are that to fintech. Fintech is one of the fastest areas of digital growth. And with that, we are a leader. And to have a Silicon Valley type company nestled in Charlotte as a headquarters, that in itself is an attractive story. And then knowing that we are committed to investing in a modern way of engineering with DevOps and creating an extensive team to do so, I think that is a great story. It's a great company with great growth opportunity, with high innovation. And although there's a lot of great companies in Charlotte, they may not offer that type of experience. So I think our experience is very unique to us and it's special. And we have a very much laid back culture. We are about engaging the teammate. We're not a hierarchical organization. We invest in our people and we focus in on winning as a team, but playing to our strengths and innovating to change the game together. So it's just a really good culture, really good story with a really great innovation opportunity for those technology folks who want to get plugged into it.
Awesome. So you mentioned really early on that communication was kind of one of the things that got you involved in leadership, partly because a lot of people like me might be a little bit introverted and hard to manage that communication. I struggled a lot with that at the beginning, learning how to talk to people properly. And how to properly communicate, especially via email and then eventually Slack and other technologies. What are some of the things that you see that people do wrong when they first become a manager or leader when it comes to communication, and how can they do that better?
Well, from my perspective, I think one of the biggest parts of communication isn't what you say, it's what you're hearing. And then how do you respond thoughtfully to that? So, communication is listening. And that's number one. So, are you an active listener? Meaning, are you forming an answer while someone's speaking to you? Are you intentional to actually hear and have empathy with whoever you're engaging? And it can be connectedness to a celebration in their voice, or if they have a concern, having empathy with where they're at, and then being thoughtful to solution together. If you're always the smartest one in the room, then there's probably a problem, right? So what are the things that you're trying to solution or solve together or do together, and being inclusive in conversation, and it begins with listening. I would say one of the biggest areas that I'm constantly working and coaching my colleagues on, and I have to be super aware of this as well. We're in a digital age, so a lot of our communication is done electronically today. And so if we take a step back and we look at some data that tells us that 90% of communication is via body language, but you can't see the body language in written form. We have to be super sensitive and intentional to be shaping our message carefully, not to lead people astray or give the wrong impression. So making sure that the sentiment is captured in the communication as well, because people can't read your body language, right? So it takes a little bit of extra time to make sure it's there, but it's fruitful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that I try to teach my team. Whenever you're emailing somebody, you don't know what mood they're in when they receive that email. They may have just had an argument with someone. They may have gotten in a car accident, or maybe they just had a great day and they're super happy.
Yep.
So you never know if they're reading that and they're saying, "Oh, this person's just ripping me," or if they're reading it and saying, "Oh, that's so thoughtful that they're trying to help me out." You have no idea the tone that they're going to receive that. So be very mindful on how you send things. And also on the reverse of that, if you're getting something, why don't you smile before you read it, and read it as if it's a smile, so that way you don't take it out of context.
I love that. That is great advice.
Yeah, I find communication is one of the things that I definitely struggled with early on, and still struggle with a little bit. And for me, it's so much easier if I just get up and go talk to someone or give them a call. So that way, at least they have my vocal tonality. They can at least get some inflection, and not just the things that I may say that don't sound very nice sometimes.
That's exactly right. Yes, you can solve a lot of pain by just picking up the phone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, phones. It's sometimes better than Slack.
That's right.
Yeah. So what are some other tips that you have maybe for a new leader that's just getting in there and they're managing their first group? How can they, within their first, let's say 90 days, make an impact and maybe do the right things without shutting the door on themselves?
Yeah, I would say don't make it about yourself. Mm-hmm. If you are leading people, you're there to lead and to serve. And to do that, you have to know the people that you're serving. So each person is not created the same. Like I mentioned, strength finders before. 1 in 33 million people have the top 5 strength as you in the same order. So it starts to show you how unique you are as an individual. So if I'm a leader, I need to understand who my people are. So whether it be using tools like Strength Finder or just having really good conversation, just getting to know your people, get to know them, understand what makes them tick, what drives them, what motivates them to come to work every day, and understand if the organization is actually creating a gap for them. Maybe they're not satisfied because something's missing for them to feel passionate about coming to work every day. So with anything, and it's very, fresh on my heart because I just joined AvidXchange a year ago and I had many folks to get to know, is you've got to take the time to get to know people. If you don't get the relationship right out of the door, then there's no trust. And leadership is about having trust so you can move at the speed of trust and work really effectively together.
Yeah, I think that's a book, isn't it? Stephen Covey's Speed of Trust.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic advice. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people forget about is what I like to call building allies. You got to build your allies outside of technology or outside of your group, so you know who your allies are within the business. Learn everybody, meet everybody, figure out what their challenges are, what their strengths are, what their things that they enjoy, what do they like about your team, what do they dislike about your team, and how can you help them, and build those relationships first, so you have that social capital in case you ever need it.
That's exactly right.
You talked a little bit about perspectives and realizing that everybody's different and sees things differently. What are some tips that somebody could have maybe that struggle, seeing things from someone else's point of view? Because I have some people on my team and myself included that sometimes I struggle with seeing things from someone else's point of view and having empathy maybe with some of the things that they're seeing. What are some tips that you have for getting, maybe I don't want to say getting in someone's head, but seeing things from someone else's perspective?
Well, for me, and I can just speak to how I kind of hold myself accountable. If I'm hearing a viewpoint that is very different than my own, and I'm having a defensive posture to it, there's probably a bias in me that is preventing me from actually hearing. So it's kind of when I sense that in myself, it's kind of stop, pause, pull back, and then seek to understand where they're coming from. And this took me a good bit of time to understand, but acknowledging someone else's point of view doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. So acceptance doesn't mean that you agree. And I think I struggled with that early on in my career, and I'm sure I still do at times, where I feel like if I'm acknowledging a viewpoint that I disagree with, I'm actually agreeing with it, but that's not the case. So first, it's am I listening? So do we have an open mindset to hear? And if we have a defensive posture to the conversation, it probably is an indicator that we're closing ourselves off. And then secondly, start to have conversations of talking across the difference. So fundamentally, where is the disagreement or the rub at in a dialogue from a different perspective point of view? And then how do you talk through that to get to a solution? Because there's a lot of different ways to solve, different perspectives or, to bring alignment. So seek to understand each other's perspective so you can get to a common ground to move forward. The tip would be really self-reflect in the conversation and see how you're showing up in that dialogue.
Yeah, that's really good. I've never really thought about thinking about how, if I'm defensive, then there's a reason for that. What is that reason? Let's dig into that. I think that's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, it's helpful, and it's holding yourself accountable. You're showing up and you're setting the tone for how other people will set up. You're also creating a safe space where people can know that they can come to you even if they have a different perspective. So it's another layer of building trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I found myself when I was first became a manager, and someone would offer an idea that I thought was just absolutely dumb and stupid, I would actually say that, which don't ever tell someone their ideas are stupid. And I kind of look back at it and want to kick myself. And now it's more like I want to think, why would a smart person say a dumb idea? Let's try to figure that out, and then figure out what their reason was for coming there, and ask them valid questions and ask them things. And then maybe I realized that, that's not a very dumb idea. I had a dumb way of looking at it. They had the right idea. And now that I've been able to kind of check myself a little bit more, it makes a lot of sense. But I like that idea that the realizing if you're having a defensive posture or not. So this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate having you on. Do you have any last pieces of advice or tips or anything for that new manager or new leader that's getting out there that is trying to figure out how can I get my team to accelerate and help move them along in the right direction and trust me, build that trust that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, I really, it's a core principle of mine. I think you have to show up and be vulnerable and authentic. Mm-hmm. And if you're not vulnerable in a conversation, vulnerability leads to authenticity. So in order to move forward with any relationship, whether it be a working relationship, in a reporting structure, it doesn't matter. You could be reporting to someone and you're building that rapport with your boss versus, someone reporting into you, or it could be the community that you're serving or your family. It doesn't really matter where you're at. If you don't show up and you're not truthful and vulnerable with where you're at, even when you're not strong, if you're a brand new leader, chances are you're not going to be, the top leader. So you have to be vulnerable, lean on other people who've been there before, get coaching, seek advice, ask people how they're seeing you. So I would just say show up and be humble and be vulnerable. Vulnerability builds trust because people know you don't have a hidden agenda. And in a day and age where we're moving at the speed of light and we don't always stop, pause, take time to build relationship, the motive can be questioned if the relationship's not there. So that is the core principle is you got to build those relationships, and it starts with authenticity, which leads to vulnerability.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. That's excellent. And that's one of the things that I see a lot of people. They don't want to be vulnerable because they're afraid of what might come out. But if you're not vulnerable, then you're obviously not authentic. So I think that's fantastic. How can people find out more about you or connect with you and learn more about AvidXchange and the things that's going on in Charlotte?
Absolutely. So you can find me on AvidXchange's website at AvidXchange.com, and that is AvidXchange.com. And then I am also on LinkedIn, Angelic Gibson, ANGELIC GIBSON.
All right. I'll link that up in the show notes as well. So you guys can find that at geekleader.com and click on through. Thank you for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, John. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Angelic Gibson, and be sure to follow the show. Go to Twitter and follow me at John Rauda. Make sure you subscribe to the show, and please leave a rating and review and let Angelic know how much you appreciated the show. That'd be awesome. I'd greatly appreciate it, and thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you guys listening. It means the world to me. Keep it up. Thanks.